I woke up to fluorescent lights buzzing faintly above me. And silence. No one by my bedside. No flowers. No cards. Just a scratchy hospital gown and a sharp pain in my chest, like someone had tried to crack me open and forgot to stitch me back together emotionally. A nurse came in and gasped when she saw my eyes open. "Oh my God, Mrs. Turner, you're awake. After all this time." I blinked, confused. "How long?" 4.5 months. "You've been in a coma." 4.5 months. My fingers trembled as I reached for the oxygen mask they'd just removed. My throat felt like sandpaper. My mouth tried to form the next question, but I already knew something was wrong. "Where's my daughter?" Croaked. "She was here at first," the nurse said quietly, then changed the subject. That was the first red flag. The second one hit me like a knife to the heart when I finally got access to my phone, after begging the nurses for hours. My voicemail was empty. No new text. Just one missed call from a real estate agency in Clearwater, Florida. The same town where my beach house was. Called the number. A chipper man answered. "Mrs. Turner. You're alive. We were told the house had to be liquidated due to your passing. The sale was finalized 3 months ago." "Excuse me." He chuckled nervously. "Your daughter Meredith handled all the paperwork. We assumed it was legitimate." I dropped the phone. My mouth went dry. My only daughter sold my beach house while I was in a coma and claimed I was dead. But it didn't stop there. Because 2 days later, when a kind nurse named Helen helped me get a lawyer friend of mine on the line, I found out that the entire $700,000 from the beach house sale had been transferred to an account that wasn't mine. It belonged to a man named Craig Jensen, her boyfriend, a man I had never even met. The betrayal didn't just sting. It tore something in me that felt permanent. Meredith had stood beside me when her father died. She had held my hand when I buried my sister. She had even made a toast on my 80th birthday saying I was the strongest woman she knew. And yet here I was, 4 months in a coma, and she didn't just forget me. She buried me alive for money. And now I was awake. But I said nothing. Not yet. 'Cause I needed to know why. And I needed to know what else she took. My name is Linda Turner, and I am an 85-year-old retired physician. I used to work at Johns Hopkins Hospital. I delivered babies, saved lives, and sat with people as they took their last breath. But somehow nothing prepared me for this. I've always been a quiet person. Not the kind to throw punches or yell. I loved it deeply. I forgave quickly. And that might have been my mistake. I raised Meredith alone after her father died of a heart attack when she was just 10. We didn't have much, but I gave her everything I could. Ballet classes, piano lessons, books from second-hand stores. She was brilliant and kind. Least I thought she was. But I started noticing the change 2 years ago, after she met Craig. He was slick, charming, a few years younger than her, with a used car salesman smile that made my stomach churn. Meredith started pulling away. First it was little things, missing our weekly calls, forgetting my medication pickups. Then she stopped visiting entirely. But I never imagined she could do this. The doctor said I couldn't leave the hospital for at least a week, but every night I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking of the house. My memories there, my late husband's ashes on the mantel, the seashell wind chime Meredith made when she was 8. Sold like I was nothing. And to top it all, I discovered Craig had a criminal record. Wire fraud. Identity theft. He'd been arrested before. And Meredith. She had signed my name on the power of attorney document. While I was unconscious. My lawyer said the case could take months to investigate, especially since the money was already spent or moved. And Craig. Nowhere to be found. But I wasn't going to let this go. 'Cause I had more than just memories. I had proof. What Meredith didn't know was that I had a secret safe at the beach house. One she didn't even know existed. And inside it was a flash drive with every document. Insurance, property deeds, retirement accounts, and something else. Letter. Confession. Written by her. She had once admitted something terrible to me. Something about Craig, and I had recorded it. I never thought I'd need it. Till now. I decided not to call her. Not yet. I needed to see her face. So when they discharged me, I didn't go home. I went straight to her condo in Tampa. I sat in the taxi for a long time outside her building, heart thudding like a slow drumbeat. And just as I reached for the buzzer, I saw her through the window, laughing, holding hands with Craig, carrying shopping bags, wearing my necklace. That's when something snapped in me. She hadn't just sold my beach house. She had erased me from her life. And that's when I knew. This wasn't over. Not even close. I didn't ring the buzzer. Couldn't. Not with my legs trembling. Not with the sight in front of me making me feel like I was still trapped in a nightmare. Meredith looked so carefree. Like a teenager in love. Laughing. Tossing her golden hair like she didn't just sell my life for shopping sprees and a man with a crooked smile. And that necklace. It wasn't just any necklace. It was my husband's last gift to me before he passed. A delicate gold chain with a small emerald pendant. I used to wear it every Sunday. Every anniversary. She knew what it meant. And she was wearing it while I was dead. My mouth dried up. I couldn't breathe. The taxi driver turned and asked if I wanted to go up. I shook my head. Take me to a motel. Somewhere quiet. That night I barely slept. I stared at the stained motel ceiling, clutching the old hospital blanket I'd taken with me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her smiling face. Her fingers curled around that emerald like it was hers by right. My own daughter. She hadn't just taken my house. She had taken me. And suddenly, I didn't feel old anymore. Felt awake. The next morning I got a burner phone from a drugstore and called my lawyer friend, Ronald. He was my old colleague from back in Baltimore, now retired in Sarasota. We hadn't spoken in years, but when he heard what happened, he didn't even hesitate. Linda, he said, voice stern. She forged documents, impersonated a living person, and sold real property under false pretenses. That's grand larceny. Felony fraud. But she's my daughter, I whispered. I don't care if she's your grandmother's ghost. We're going to fix this. He told me to meet him the next morning with every bit of evidence I had. So I did something I hadn't done in years. I pulled on a wig and my late husband's old fishing hat and took a bus to Clearwater, to what used to be my beach house. It was painted a different color now, light gray instead of faded blue. The porch had new railings. But I still recognized the crack in the third step, the bird bath I placed under the palm tree, and the ceramic cat Meredith made me in 7th grade that still sat crooked on the windowsill. She hadn't even moved it. Just sold the house and walked away. I snuck around back and looked under the loose floorboard behind the garden shed. My hands shook as I pulled out the dusty metal lockbox. Inside, just like I remembered, was the flash drive. The letters, old photos, the insurance policy. And then I saw it. Envelope. Labeled. Meredith, June 2020. Confession. It was a printed letter she wrote to me in a fit of panic. That summer she had come to me crying, saying Craig had tricked her into withdrawing money from her 401k, and now he was threatening to leave if she didn't prove she could commit. She thought I'd judge her, so she wrote it instead. She begged me not to tell anyone. But something in me, maybe it was the doctor or the mother, knew I had to keep a record. So I scanned it, saved it, and filed it away. Thank God I did. Because now I had proof she knew Craig was dangerous. And that meant this wasn't some accident. It was planned. I got back to the motel and spent the entire night copying the files to Ronald. When I told him about the letter, his voice changed. This could blow the whole thing open. But will it bring my house back? Yes. He paused. Maybe not the house. But the money. And justice. Yes. The next day, I watched from across the street as Meredith and Craig packed boxes into a U-Haul. They were moving. Running. Craig looked around nervously as if someone might spot them. Meredith kept her head low, wearing another one of my scarves. That's when I knew they suspected something. Somehow they'd heard I was alive. Or they had seen my signature on something new. like the complaint we just filed with the Florida Department of Real Estate. Ronald told me an investigator would be contacting them soon. But I didn't want to wait. I walked straight across the street and called out her name. Meredith. She dropped a box. Craig's eyes widened. And when she turned and saw me, alive, breathing, standing tall with my cane, she went pale. Her mouth opened but no sound came out. I stopped on the sidewalk, not stepping onto her rented property. Well, I said calmly, you forgot to leave me a funeral program. Mom, how? You sold my house, told the bank I was dead, and gave the money to him. Craig stepped forward. You don't have proof. Smiled. Actually, I have quite a bit. Meredith tried to stammer something, but nothing came out. You're not going anywhere, I added. Not until we talk. She started crying. It was his idea. He said you were going to die anyway and we needed the money. He said we'd pay it back. I didn't know you'd. Wake up, said. I stepped closer. Oh, sweetheart, I whispered. I always wake up. Especially when someone tries to kill me softly. And just as I turned to walk away, a car pulled up behind me. It was the investigator. With a badge. He stepped out and looked straight at Craig. Craig Jensen. We have questions for you about property fraud, elder financial abuse, and stolen assets. Craig tried to bolt. But Meredith screamed. No. I just smiled. Craig tried to make a break for it. He actually shoved Meredith aside and ran. Right across the lawn, past the mailbox, and into the street like he was sprinting for the Olympics. But what he didn't expect was that the investigator had already called backup. Patrol car screeched around the corner and cut him off. He slammed into the hood face first, and 2 officers tackled him to the ground. I watched the whole thing from the sidewalk, my cane planted firmly beside me, my heart thudding hard. Meredith was shaking. She dropped to her knees in the driveway, hands covering her mouth like it had just hit her what they'd done. Or maybe it hit her that she'd been caught. The officer walked Craig past me in cuffs. I leaned slightly forward and said quietly, You should have Googled me. I'm not easy to bury. He snarled at me, blood on his lip, but said nothing. An hour later, Meredith and I sat on opposite ends of the tiny condo living room. She refused to look at me. I could barely look at her. She poured herself a glass of water and spilled half of it on the table. I sat still, quiet, letting her sit in the mess she made. Why didn't you call me? Finally asked. When I woke up, I added. You weren't there. No card. No flowers. Nothing. She closed her eyes. I didn't think you'd come back. I'm not a pet goldfish, Meredith. I was drowning, Mom, she whispered. I had lost my job. My lease was up. Craig was helping at first. Then he said you wouldn't survive the coma. He told me if we sold the house we'd be okay. You believed him. She hesitated. You chose him over me. I took a slow breath. My chest ached, but I didn't let it show. You sold my house, I said again like I was reminding myself. You gave away the only home I built with your father. The one we scattered his ashes from. For a man you barely knew. Tears welled in her eyes, but I was past sympathy. You forged my name. Lied to the realtor. Lied to the bank. Lied to the world. I didn't want to lie, she snapped. But I was scared. He said we'd go to jail if anyone found out. He said I'd lose everything. I stood up slowly. Well, Meredith, you have. That afternoon, the investigator confirmed what Ronald feared. Craig had emptied the bank account 2 days ago. He sent the funds through a string of digital wallets and fake companies. Most of it was gone. Untraceable. But the good news. Craig had priors, and now that he tried to flee, the judge denied bail. He was stuck in county jail. As for Meredith, she hadn't technically touched the money after transferring it. She didn't benefit, on paper. But the forged documents, that could still be a felony. I had a decision to make. Do I press full charges against my own daughter? Ronald was clear. She signed the deed. She moved the funds. The judge won't go easy just because she cried in the driveway. But I wasn't sure what justice looked like anymore. I'd already lost so much. That night, I returned to the motel. I turned off the lights, sat by the window, stared at the streetlight humming outside, and for the first time in a long time, felt alone, not just because my husband was gone, but because my daughter had made a choice that showed me something I never wanted to see. I didn't really know her anymore. The next morning I got a call. It was the detective. "You need to hear this," he said. "We recovered Craig's laptop." My heart skipped. He continued, "There's something you need to see. About Meredith. And the house." "What about it?" "There were emails," he said slowly, "from your daughter weeks before your coma." Froze. "What kind of emails?" "Bank transfer requests. Title search documents. She was planning the sale before you collapsed." My throat tightened. No, that can't be true. She didn't even know I was in the hospital yet. He sighed. "I'm afraid she did, ma'am. There's more." "What?" "There's a draft email from Craig to an online seller. He was looking to buy a strong sedative, something that mimics a stroke or seizure. The timing lines up with the night you collapsed." Silence. My ears rang. "What are you saying?" I asked, even though deep down, already knew. "We think your coma wasn't natural, Mrs. Turner." And suddenly the room spun. My hand dropped the phone. I stared at the motel carpet, ugly brown and matted from years of wear, but I couldn't even feel the ground under my feet. She knew. Meredith knew before I went into a coma. She and Craig were already making plans. Legal documents. Bank transfers. They weren't just hoping I'd pass quietly. They were counting on it. And then that last part. Sedatives. Fake stroke. They hadn't just given up on me. They may have tried to kill me. I couldn't breathe. I pulled the oxygen machine closer and clipped the nasal tubes back in. My body was healing, but my heart was splintering into 1,000 sharp pieces. I thought back to that night. I had been in my kitchen making tea like always. I remembered a strange taste, a sudden wave of dizziness, my knees hitting the tile, then nothing, darkness for months. And they had the nerve to act like it was fate. It was murder, dressed in family clothes. The next day, I met Ronald at the sheriff's office. He looked at me like he wasn't sure if I was strong enough to hear it all. "I need the truth," I told him. He handed me a printed transcript. Emails. Dozens of them. Meredith wrote things like, "She's slipping. She keeps forgetting where she puts her meds. If she goes under, there's no will update yet. The house will be mine automatically. Should we just go ahead and help it happen?" Help it happen. Those 3 words will live in my bones forever. She wasn't tricked. She was the trick. The detective confirmed that a bottle of tampered tea was found in the trash outside my beach house. Months old, but enough residue left behind to match a powerful sleep-inducing drug. And guess who bought it? Craig. Using Meredith's credit card. They had planned it together. That night she brought me dinner, my favorite chicken pot pie. She insisted I relax, even poured my tea for me. I remember asking her something. "Are you staying tonight?" She said no, kissed me on the forehead, smiled, and walked out the door. I collapsed 30 minutes later. Ronald looked me dead in the eyes. They didn't just commit fraud. This could be attempted murder. No. I didn't cry. I sat back in that wooden chair and exhaled slowly. My hands stopped shaking. My chest, for the first time in days, felt still. Because now I knew the truth. And now, it was my turn to plan something. The next morning Meredith called me. She must have heard the investigation had gone deeper. "Mom," she said, her voice trembling. "Can we talk? Please." I didn't mean for it to get this far. It was Craig, I swear. He made me do things. He threatened me. I was scared. "Were you scared when you made tea that night?" I asked flatly. Silence. I heard her sniffle. "I didn't put anything in it." I didn't. He said it would just help you sleep. You mean help me stay asleep forever? Mom, please. I'm not your mother anymore, Meredith, I said. Her breath hitched. Then I hung up. That same afternoon I filed full charges. Fraud, identity theft, forgery, elder abuse, and attempted manslaughter. Ronald told me the district attorney was shocked by the case. He'd never seen one so complete, so cold. The emails, the fake signature, the drug purchase, everything lined up. But I wasn't done. I went to the bank. I reviewed all my accounts. And that's when I found out something else. Meredith had been draining my pension checks too. Over $12,000 was stolen while I was in the hospital. The nurse I trusted. Fired. She was in on it too. Paid by Craig for access to my PIN and mailbox while I was unconscious. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was a network of theft. All done by people I trusted. I stood in my motel room that night, holding a framed photo of Meredith when she was 10. Missing tooth. Blue overalls. Holding a stray kitten she had begged me to adopt. Where had that child gone? Was she buried inside the woman who nearly buried me? The next morning I put on makeup for the first time in months. I wore my late husband's wristwatch and a fresh blue cardigan. Then I walked into the courthouse, not hunched over, not broken, but like a woman who had spent her whole life saving others, and was finally ready to save herself. As I stepped into the lobby, I spotted Meredith down the hall in a navy suit, flanked by 2 attorneys. She looked older. Muller. Not like my daughter. Just a stranger with my last name. And when her eyes met mine, she looked away. Because this time, she couldn't face me. Courtrooms are cold. Not just the air. Not just the stone floors or echoing ceilings. But the feeling. Everything there is sharp. Truth, lies, judgment. Even silence. I sat in my chair, hands folded neatly in my lap, while Meredith fidgeted beside her lawyer. She didn't look at me. Her once bright hair was tied back so tight it made her look like a stranger. No makeup. No jewelry. She had returned my necklace by mail. I never opened the envelope. It was too late. That day we were not mother and daughter. We were opposing sides. The judge was kind but firm. He glanced over his glasses at me and said, "Mrs. Turner, are you well enough to speak today?" I smiled gently. "Sir, I'm well enough to lift the whole courtroom if I have to." Few chuckled. Meredith flinched. Ronald started the case with a stack of evidence. Documents, emails, bank transfers, video surveillance from the bank, the forged power of attorney, Craig's signed drug purchase agreement, phone records, the flash drive I recovered from the safe. Everything. Piece by piece, we laid it out like a jigsaw puzzle of betrayal. Each time the judge turned a page, I watched Meredith shrink lower into her chair. Her lawyer tried to argue coercion. She was under emotional pressure, Your Honor. Her boyfriend manipulated her. She had no criminal intent. But that's when Ronald stood up and dropped the bomb. He held up the confession letter. The one from Meredith. The one she wrote before I even went into the coma. He read aloud. "If anything happens to her, I get the house. We just have to keep it quiet until it's official." The courtroom went still. Not a sound. The judge took off his glasses. He looked directly at Meredith and said, "Did you write this letter?" Her voice cracked. "Yes. And did you knowingly sign your mother's name to sell her property while she was incapacitated?" "Yes." "Did you benefit from the funds?" "She gave the money to Craig," her lawyer interrupted. The judge raised a hand. "I want her to answer." Meredith's voice was barely a whisper. "Yes." The judge nodded slowly, his face unreadable. "I've presided over hundreds of fraud cases. But this," he looked straight at me, "this is the first time I've seen a woman survive her own death certificate." I could have broken down crying right there. But I didn't. I sat tall. Because I wasn't a victim anymore. During the recess, Meredith's lawyer approached us. He asked for a deal. "She's willing to cooperate," he said. She'll give back everything she has left. She'll testify fully against Craig. No more games. I stared at him. Does she want mercy or forgiveness? She says she wants her mother back. Smiled. Tell her that woman died the night she forged my name. But in truth, part of me was cracking inside. She was still my daughter. My baby. I raised her, bathed her, taught her how to tie her shoes and sing, "You are my sunshine." And now, she was just a criminal in a courthouse. How do you grieve someone who's still alive? Later that day, something strange happened. While I was sitting alone near the vending machine, an older man in a charcoal suit sat down beside me. White beard, quiet smile. He had been watching the whole trial. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a tattered wallet photo. "My son stole from me too," he said softly. "Cleaned out my account the same week I had heart surgery. Told the bank I was senile." I looked at him. My eyes welled. "What did you do?" He shrugged. "Took him to court. Got every cent back. But the man who once called me dad, he's gone." "Did it get better?" Yes. He looked forward. "No. But I did." Those words sat with me like an anchor. I didn't know if I could ever get my daughter back. But maybe could get me back. The next day, the verdict came in for Craig. Guilty on all charges. Sentenced to 10 years without parole. When the officers dragged him out, he passed by me and muttered, "Old hag." I smiled sweetly. "And you're still broke." But Meredith's case was far from over. The judge ordered a financial audit. Every cent she touched, every bank account, every gift Craig gave her, cars, clothes, electronics, was to be returned or accounted for. He hasn't decided on sentencing yet. Not until I made my choice. He gave me 30 days to decide whether to push for prison time or petition for alternative sentencing, community service, restitution, mandatory therapy. Everyone turned to me. Even Meredith. Eyes swollen, hands folded, waiting. And that's when I stood up and said, "She can go free." The murmurs. The judge raised an eyebrow. "But only if she tells me the full truth. Under oath. No lies. No edits. I want to know why." And the judge nodded. "Then let's reconvene. Because before I make peace, I need to hear my daughter say what I already know. She wanted me dead." I sat in the courtroom, staring at the empty witness stand like it was the edge of a cliff. And my daughter was about to jump. Meredith entered slowly. Hair down this time. No tight bun. No power suit. Just a plain blouse, hands shaking, lips pale. She looked like a girl again, not the woman who nearly sold me into silence. The judge reminded her, "You are under oath. Any lie, any omission will be treated as perjury." She nodded. I held my breath. And then she spoke. "It started 2 years ago," Meredith began. "Not with Craig. With me. I was broke. I had credit card debt. I was ashamed." I sat still. She wouldn't look at me. I kept telling myself I was better than what I was doing. "But the truth is, I started using your name long before the beach house. I take small withdrawals from your pension. Little ones. I told myself I'd pay it back. But then," her voice cracked, "then Craig came. And he made it all feel easier." I paused. Then added something I wasn't ready for. "Because Craig was my boss." The room gasped. Even the judge sat forward. She continued. "He was my supervisor at the insurance firm. We weren't even dating at first. He saw my financial records. Knew I was desperate. He said if I helped him get access to elder clients' data, he'd wipe my debt clean." Tears rolled down her face now. "And I did. Gave him names. Counts. But one day I walked in on him reading your file. Name. Or house. Your retirement plan." I paused. "I begged him to leave you out of it." I clenched my fists. So she had a moment, one moment where she could have stopped this. But she didn't. Meredith's voice dropped to a whisper. "That night you collapsed. Craig was already gone. I'd broken up with him. I knew he was dangerous. I knew I was in over my head. But he came to the house anyway. Now everyone leaned forward. She stared down at her hands. I didn't make the tea, Mom. And blinked. What? She looked up, finally meeting my eyes. I didn't give you the tea. I went out for your prescription. I left the door unlocked. When I came back, you were already on the floor. And Craig was gone. My heart twisted. Could it be true? Was he the one who slipped it in? She sobbed into her sleeve. I panicked. I didn't call the police. I didn't tell the doctors about the tea. I was afraid it would trace back to me. Craig came back days later and said it was a miracle you weren't dead. He told me I had one chance to make it worth it. She looked right at the judge. And I took it. I signed your name. I sold your house. I gave him the money. I let it all happen. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't beg. She just stared at the floor like she was already in her prison. And maybe she was. The courtroom fell silent. Even Ronald beside me didn't speak. But I felt something shifting inside me. Something awful and heavy, like a storm finally passing. 'Cause now I know. The truth didn't erase the betrayal. But it gave it shape. Gave it weight. And it meant I could finally start putting it down. The judge cleared his throat. Given the testimony and the victim's petition for alternative sentencing, the court will proceed with the following conditions. He listed them one by one. Full restitution plan. 5 years of supervised community service. Mandatory therapy. A lifetime ban from handling elder accounts. And a public apology. Recorded, documented, and filed. Understood. Meredith turned to me. Mom. I shook my head gently. Not yet. That evening I sat on a bench outside the courthouse. The sky was pink. Quiet. Warm breeze. I took a breath and opened my notebook. Inside were letters I had written during my recovery. Letters I never sent. To Meredith. Craig. To myself. And that's when something strange happened. A woman in her 50s sat beside me. Strangers. Never met her. She said, I saw you there. He nodded. She continued, I buried my father last year. Found out my brother emptied his account while he was dying. I didn't have the courage to fight. But watching you. He paused. You gave me hope. That night I returned to the motel. And I made one final change. I called a real estate agent. Not to reclaim the beach house. But to buy a new one. Smaller place. On a hill. Far from betrayal. Close to peace. I thought the worst was over. After the courtroom. After the apology. After I put my name back on legal papers and wiped my daughter from all financial access. I thought I could breathe again. I bought a small cottage just outside Tallahassee. A modest place with a garden and a wraparound porch. Just big enough for me and a few pots of tulips. Peaceful. Quiet. Too quiet. Because peace never lasts long when evil is still walking. It was a Sunday morning when the call came. I had just finished watering my flowers. The sun was warm. The air smelled of honeysuckle. I sat down with my coffee, finally feeling something close to free. Then my phone rang. Mrs. Turner. Yes. This is Officer Klein from Hillsborough County Corrections. I'm afraid I have some news. My fingers curled around the mug. Go on. There was an incident. Inmate Craig Jensen escaped during a hospital transfer late last night. Froze. Escaped? Yes, ma'am. He assaulted a guard. Stole his uniform and fled in a maintenance van. He has not been caught. And we believe he may try to reach out to anyone involved in his conviction. My blood ran cold. That meant me. They told me not to panic. They said patrol cars would be nearby. That I could stay with a neighbor or family member. But I didn't have a family anymore. And I was done running. That night I checked every door, every window. Kept my lights on. I placed a heavy umbrella stand against the front door and put a rolling pin under my pillow. I didn't sleep. Not 1 minute. The next day, a package arrived at my porch. No return address. Just a plain brown box. I stood staring at it for a full hour before I touched it. When I finally opened it, my stomach dropped. Inside was my old hospital bracelet. The one from the night I was admitted after the coma. Tied to it was a note. "You should have stayed asleep." I called the police immediately. They dusted for prints. Said they'd notify the marshals. But they didn't find anything useful. "He's taunting you," the officer said. "We'll increase patrols." But the damage was done. Craig was out there, watching, waiting, and he wanted revenge. I packed a go-bag that night. One change of clothes. Burner phone. My late husband's pocket knife. I wasn't sure if I could use it, but it made me feel like I had something. The police gave me a panic button. I kept it around my neck. Every creak in the house felt like a threat. Every shadow outside the window made my heart race. And then, 3 nights later, heard it. A knock on the back door. 3 slow knocks. I held my breath. Reached for the panic button, ready to press. And a whisper. "Linda, I know you're in there." Pressed the button. Alarms blared from the motion detectors. Floodlights kicked on. But I didn't wait. I swung the back door open with all my strength and screamed, "I'm not the woman you buried anymore." There was no one there. Just darkness. Just fear. 10 minutes later the cops arrived. They searched the yard, the woods, the nearby sheds. And they found footprints. Boot tracks. Leading straight to the edge of my property. Then vanishing into the trees. He had been watching me. Close. Too close. The lead detective looked shaken. "He's smart," he said. "But he's obsessed. That's a weakness." He nodded. "I'm not afraid of him," I whispered. The detective raised an eyebrow. "You should be." I met his eyes. I was afraid when I woke up alone in a hospital bed and realized my daughter tried to erase me. I was afraid when I saw my beach house in someone else's name. But now, I leaned forward. Now I'm awake. And no one will ever put me to sleep again. That same night something strange happened. I found a letter in my mailbox. A real one. Handwritten. No stamp. Just folded carefully. It read, "You have no idea what he's planning. He's not alone. Watch your back. A friend." There was no signature. No fingerprints. Nothing. But one thing was clear. Craig wasn't finished. And I had one chapter left to make things right. He came to finish what he started, but I was ready. It was the longest night of my life. I didn't sleep. I sat by the kitchen window, hands wrapped around a thermos of coffee, flashlight on the table, panic button on my neck, and the pocket knife from my husband resting beside me like an old friend. The trees outside rustled softly. The wind pushed shadows across the porch. I had survived a coma. I had survived betrayal. Now I had to survive this. The clock struck 3:12 a.m. That's when I heard it. The back door creaked open. No knock this time. Just footsteps. Low. Careful. Then a voice. "You're a hard woman to kill, Linda." I didn't speak. I stayed still. I listened as he crept into the hallway. "I could have let you die," Craig muttered. "But no, you had to wake up. You had to ruin everything." The floor creaked under his weight. Closer. Then silence. He was in the doorway. And I turned on the light. I looked him dead in the eyes. Gray prison uniform. Wild hair. Thin from weeks on the run. And yet, that same smug smirk. "You're too old to fight me, Linda." I lifted the knife, steady and calm. "I don't have to fight you. I just have to witness your fall." And then I smiled. Because what he didn't know. I had been recording him since he opened the door. A tiny camera was hidden behind the vase on the mantel. Ronald helped me install it. The panic button. Already triggered. Police were on their way. And the entire confession, every word, was being live-streamed to the county sheriff's inbox. "Everything you just said," I whispered, "is already on file." His eyes widened. "You stupid old." He lunged. But I was faster than he thought. I ducked behind the table as he knocked over a chair. Crack. The front door burst open. Officers swarmed in. Guns drawn. Hands in the air. Now. Craig froze. One last glance at me. Rage and fear tangled in his face. Then he dropped to the floor, arms out. They cuffed him again. Hard. Dragged him to the squad car. This time he didn't speak. No threats. No smug smirks. He knew he'd lost. And I hadn't laid a single finger on him. The sheriff walked over to me. "Ma'am, are you all right?" Exhaled. My knees buckled. He caught me gently. "I'm all right now," I whispered. Because I knew it was over. The next week, the news made headlines. Elderly woman outsmarts escaped fraudster. 85-year-old survivor brings justice full circle. Neighbors brought flowers. Young women came to my porch and said things like, "I hope I'm as strong as you when I'm old." And for the first time in months, I believed them. Meredith sent a letter. Not a call. Just a letter. "Mom, I know I'll never earn your trust again. But I'm in therapy now. I've started working at a shelter. Every day I think of what I did. Sorry. I hope someday you can find it in your heart to forgive me. If not as your daughter, then just as a broken person trying to rebuild." I didn't write back. Not yet. But I didn't rip the letter either. That's something. I started gardening again. Joined a quilting group. Volunteered at the hospital once a week, talking to stroke survivors and coma patients. One woman grabbed my hand and asked, "Do you ever feel like you lost everything?" And I said, "No, I didn't lose everything. I gave everything." And they mistook that for weakness. I leaned closer. But when I woke up, I found something they could never take. My voice, my truth, and my peace. One day, I sat on the porch and looked at the sea of tulips blooming across the yard. All shades of pink, white, and purple. Strong, bright, unapologetic. Just like me. Because in the end, I didn't get revenge with fists or fire. I got it by surviving. By staying alive. By making sure they remembered my name. Forever. It's been 8 months since that night Craig broke into my home. Sometimes I still wake up in the middle of the night, holding my breath, expecting to hear footsteps on the porch. But then I look around, touch the lavender-scented pillow beside me, and I remember, I'm safe. I got a full security system installed. Motion sensors, cameras, even a big "beware of dog" sign, though all I've got is a lazy old cat named Buttons who barely moves unless it's tuna night. But I don't live in fear anymore. What surprises me the most isn't how strong I became. It's how soft I let myself become again. Laugh now. Bake. I wear my favorite earrings, even when I'm home alone. I play old records and dance in my living room when no one's watching. This is the life they tried to take from me. And I'm living it like a rebellion. I received a second letter from Meredith last week. It wasn't handwritten. It was type. Neater. Calmer. More focused. I've been volunteering every Sunday at the women's shelter. I teach financial literacy now. Isn't that ironic? I know there's no fixing what I did. But Mom, I hope one day we can sit across a table again. Even if we never talk about the past. Even if you never forgive me. I just want to see you smile again. Even from a distance. I stared at the letter for a long time. Then with shaking hands I wrote 5 words back. I'm not ready. But maybe. Mailed it. That was enough for now. Forgiveness is like planting seeds. It doesn't bloom overnight. But if you water it, if you're patient, sometimes it grows into something unexpected. Last week, I stood in my garden watching a young couple walk past with their toddler. The little girl waved at me. "Hi, Grandma." I smiled and waved back. And just like that, the ache in my chest didn't feel so heavy. Because I realized, even if my own child failed me, I still had so much love to give. I decided to start a foundation. The Wake Up Fund. It helps seniors recover from fraud, abuse, or financial betrayal. We help them rebuild homes, file charges, and reclaim what's theirs. I may not be a doctor anymore, but I'm still saving lives. Just in a different way. Craig was sentenced to 14 years in federal prison. No parole. No more notes. No more packages. Just silence. And sometimes, silence is the greatest form of justice. My favorite time of day is right after sunrise. I sit on the porch with a warm blanket and coffee, watching the dew slide off the leaves. Birdsong. Breeze. Soft wind. And I whisper to myself, "You made it, Linda. You made it through." 'Cause they wrote me off. But I rewrote the ending. It had been nearly a year since the courtroom, since the letters, since I planted that first batch of tulips in my new garden. I never thought healing would come with dirt under my nails and bees buzzing around my sleeves, but it did. The garden grew. The mail stopped bringing threats. And I began to remember what it felt like to be Linda, not just the woman who was betrayed. On a quiet Thursday, I got a knock on the door. Not a delivery. Not the police. Not a neighbor. Just a young woman. Maybe in her mid-20s. Blonde. Freckles. Eyes soft and unsure. She clutched a worn tote bag and shifted from one foot to the other as I opened the screen. "Can I help you?" Yes. She swallowed. Then said something I wasn't prepared for. "I think I'm your granddaughter." I gripped the doorframe. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" "My name's Claire," she whispered. I'm Meredith's daughter." Time stopped. I had never met her. I never even knew Meredith had been pregnant. Not a word. Not a letter. Nothing. She must have been born sometime in the early 2000s. When Meredith and I were barely speaking. When she was still blaming me for everything. Her divorce, her debt, her disappointments. "Meredith never told me about you," I said slowly. Claire nodded. "She didn't tell me about you either. Until last month. She told me what she did. She told me everything." Tears brimmed in her eyes. "And I needed to meet you. I needed to see for myself if you were still alive." I invited her in. We sat in the sunroom. Poured lemonade. My hands shook the whole time. Claire reached into her tote bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was crinkled and faded, like someone had read it 100 times. "I found this in one of her boxes," she said. It was a letter. From me. One of the many I wrote and never mailed. One where I wrote, "Even if you never call me Mom again, I hope one day you'll remember I loved you first." Claire said. She kept it. She never knew how to say she was sorry. Cried. Not loud. Not messy. Just soft tears, falling like rain down my cheeks. Not because everything was okay now, but because someone came back. Over the next few weeks, Claire became my shadow. She helped in the garden. She asked about my late husband. She brought over almond cookies and old family photos she'd found in Meredith's attic. We never forced anything. We just shared space. And slowly, for the first time in decades, my house felt like home again. One evening, as we watched the sun dip behind the trees, Claire whispered, "You saved her, you know. Even if she broke you." I looked at her. She smiled faintly. "She's clean now. Working 2 jobs. Still goes to therapy. She said she doesn't expect forgiveness, but hopes one day you'll let her bring flowers. Even if you never open the door." I didn't answer right away. But I thought of the girl sitting beside me. This granddaughter I never knew existed. And who looked at me with love I hadn't earned, but maybe still deserved. A week later Meredith came. She didn't come up the steps. She stood at the gate, holding yellow tulips. She didn't say a word. Just laid them on the stone wall and walked away. And this time, I didn't cry. I just whispered. Maybe. Because some stories don't end with a bang. They end with a bloom. Speech balloon if this story reminded you that strength doesn't fade with age, and that healing can begin even after betrayal. Like, comment and subscribe. Your voice matters. Your survival matters. And no matter how broken your past may feel, you can still write a new ending. Join us for more stories where justice whispers, love rebuilds, and the underestimated rise.